after you've gotten all the Kanto badges, you're actually in the remake able to choose a Kanto starter here on this table. They're not in the original game, but I'll go over them here just for the sake of going over them, because, you know, this is supposed to be also for the remake. There is Bulbasaur, who is a Grass Poison type. Pretty much the original Grass Poison type. It's very defensive. It's pretty average. It's very balanced. So if you want a balanced Grass type, it's a good idea. You have Charmander, who is rather fast. It gets a flying type when it's fully evolved, though, so it doesn't have a whole ton of weaknesses. So it's pretty good. And then you have Squirtle, who is very defensive and is, you know, your classic water starter. All of them very good choices. I really could not... There's really not a single one of them that I wouldn't recommend on at least some team. All of them very usable. First off, Caterpie. It's decent, but it's not as good as it was in the original games, because the psychic moves that it would learn as a later stage aren't as effective in this game, so its bad stats kind of shine through a lot more in this one. Next up is Metapod, just Caterpie's evolved form, except all it can know is Harden, though, so I would recommend if you wanted a Butterfree, I mean, just catch it as a Caterpie and train it up, though, because it's harder to train as a Metapod. Butterfree, the final evolutionary stage of Caterpie, it learns some psychic moves, but it's not the best psychic user due to its lackluster stats and bad type. But I guess, you know. By the way, love the grass here. Oh, apparently this guy's name is Nick. Next up is Weedle. It's basically Caterpie, except it can poison. Not really anything special about it. It's not very good, but, you know, if you want to have a Pokemon that can poison early in the game, it's not too bad of a choice. I guess next up is Kakuna, which is Weedle's evolved form. Nothing to really say about that. It's just Weedle's evolved form, and all it knows is hard. It's Metapod, but for Weedle. Random encounter. Next up is Beedrill, just Butterfree's counterpart for Weedle. Interesting fact, with Twin Needle, this is the only Pokemon that can poison steel types. Only in this game, though. It was removed in future games. Pidgey, which is a pretty average flying type Pokemon. It's not a bad Pokemon to catch. Actually, there's one right there. Unfortunately, you can't catch Pokemon yet in this game, so I'd recommend just fighting all the wild Pokemon you see to get your levels up a little bit. Normally, I wouldn't recommend fighting wild Pokemon, though, but there you go. Pidgey's pretty balanced. It's not too bad, not too good, though, but, you know, it's balanced, and it's not a bad flying type to have this. So if you want a flying type this early in the game, I'd recommend it. Next up is Rattata. Has a very shallow move pool, not a very good Pokemon. Some people use it as an HM slave. Personally, I don't. Raticate is just the evolved form of Rattata, which we've covered before. A lot of people consider this a good HM slave. Personally, I think the Senret family is better. It learns good moves, but its stats kind of hinder it. Then we got Spearow, which I just ran into. I like Spearow quite a bit. It's a flying type that's really fast and offensive, really aggressive feeling. I like it a lot. Aggressive feeling, wow. Innuendos much. Fearow, just like I said with Spearow, it's very fast, very aggressive, not much that I've already said. I used it in my last Pokemon Let's Play. It's all around alright. Next up, Ekans, which we did not find, unfortunately. Ekans is only in Silver. Ekans is not too bad of a poison type early in the game. It really is outclassed by other poison types later, so I wouldn't exactly recommend picking one up. But that's just me. Arbok's the evolved form of Ekans, only found in Silver. It really isn't that spectacular of a Pokemon. It's kind of frail and doesn't necessarily set itself apart from other poison types very well, much like I said about Ekans. Personally, I like the Coughing family a lot more for poison types, plus there's a lot of others that are dual-type poison that are a lot better. Pikachu doesn't have very diverse moves, it's mainly just electric attacks with a few others, it's not very diverse. But if you need something that can use electric attacks, it's pretty decent, has been in every game. Sandshrew is slow and defensive. Personally, I prefer Phanpy for a ground type, though, but I guess Sandshrew is not too bad, and I guess you're playing Gold and Silver, you can't have a Phanpy this early in the game, so... personally, if you want a good ground type, I'd recommend Wooper a lot more, because its other same type attack bonus is just so much better. But yeah, it's not something I'd recommend, personally, because there's much better ground types. Sandslash, which is pretty defensive, though, but I personally don't like it very much for a ground type. I kind of like, you know, the Cubone family and Phanpy family a bit better, but that's just me. Nidoran Female, which is a poison-type Pokemon that's rather defensive. It's not a bad Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination. It's basically just a counterpart to Nidoran Male, which is the more offensive one. They're both pretty good Pokemon. They have fairly identical movesets. Only real difference being is just that one's more defensive, the other one's more offensive. Not much else going on there. Clefairy is a very rare Pokemon, and it's actually a pretty good normal type. It's kind of like a weaker version of Chansey if you get it evolved. I prefer to call Clefable Blissey on a diet. That's just what I call it. But yeah, you can find that here, and it's actually a pretty good Pokemon if you want to have a normal type and you don't have one already. I recommend it probably a lot more than I recommend Gramble or any of the other normal types we run into here. Aside from maybe Snorlax, but yeah. Clefable's a very practical use Pokemon. It's got some very good moves. It's got decent stats around the board. It's pretty good. Vulpix is not a very good fire type in my opinion. Vulpix just... it lacks a lot of the stuff that makes good fire types, just not very good moves, not very good stats in particular. It's mainly special defense, which isn't very good for fire types. Jigglypuff, which is only in Gold and Silver, not in this game. Jigglypuff is a normal type. It's not that great. Its Sing attack is pretty inaccurate. I don't really recommend it. Zubat, which is a fast Pokemon, really good for poisoning, and it pretty much always attacks first at this point in the game, so it's not bad. Ooh, Totodog level 7. Next is Golbat. Golbat is a very fast Pokemon, a much better poison type than Arbok, though, so if you want that, I can somewhat recommend that. Can be a little bit hard to get it fully evolved, but it's definitely worth it. Oddish is a grass poison type. Oddish is very slow. It is a split evolution, though, but personally I'm not a big fan of either of its evolutions, though, so I'm not really gonna recommend it too much. Paris is a horrible Pokemon to use in battle. Has frail defenses, it's really slow. Not very usable at all, but it's great as an HM slave because it learns both Flash and Cut, which are very commonly used HMs. Next up is Venonat. Venonat doesn't do much to separate itself from other poison types, and it's not a particularly good bug type. There's far better bug types out there if you want to use one, so I'd say skip out on this one, but I don't know, it's not terrible, it's just painfully average. Venomoth is a weird Pokemon, even though it clearly flies. In every game it can be hit by ground-type moves. Not that that makes it a bad Pokemon, I just always thought that was funny. I suppose if you wanted a poison type that also has some flying moves to it, you probably would be better off going with Crobat, but that's just what I personally think. If you want it, not like I can stop you. Diglett's Cave. 2 Pokemon here, Diglett and its evolved form Dugtrio. They are known as the ultimate revenge killers because they're really, really fast, but they're really, really frail, so they're really good for getting in a strong attack. Max Revive is hidden right there, obviously, as we got, and that's it. That is the end of the dungeon. That was it. Anyway, I guess we can head over here. Just because I wanted to have a special place in my heart for this thing. Okay, I actually forgot to mention it in Johto. Is Meowth. Meowth can you find on the street. Meowth is a very fast Pokemon, so if you want a Pokemon that can get in some really good, free, cheap shots, Meowth's your guy. But I assume by this point you probably have a better normal type if you're using normal types. Persian's the evolved form of Meowth. I already covered Meowth in this video, just as high speed. It's good for some free, cheap shots. That's about it. Psyduck, this is only found in Crystal. In this area, at least. It can be found in the other games later. Psyduck's a decent special attacker, but there's better water types out there. I'd say only get it if you're just a really big fan of Psyduck. Mankey, which evolves into the fastest fighting type in the game, Primeape. I personally love this Pokemon. It is very unexpectedly good. Primeape, which is the fastest fighting type in the game. If you want a fighting type sweeper, definitely a good option. And then, other than Primeape, is going to be Growlithe is a fantastic fire type Pokemon with very balanced stats, learns really good moves, and is just pretty much a jack of all trades. It can only be found in Gold and Crystal, though, so if you're playing Silver, Soul Silver, you kind of miss out on it. Poliwag, which can only be found at night. It's really good because it puts foes to sleep and is a pretty good water type, but if you just Totodile, you don't need that. Poliwhirl is a very balanced water type, and of course it has an item. Why would you have a regular berry here in this part of the game? Okay, anyway. But anyway, Poliwhirl is very balanced. Its evolutions are pretty much the same. I personally prefer Poliwrath to Politoed, but that's just me, because Poliwrath has dual typing, and it's a pretty good type combination. Abro, which is a fantastic psychic type if you can get it to evolve. You will need a trait, of course, though, but it is one of the best special attackers in the game, easily. Tough to raise, but great to have. Really difficult to catch because it'll use Teleport on the first turn, which makes it run away. This guy right here, he will trade you a Machop for an Abra. In Gold and Silver, he'll trade it for a Drowsy. Machop is a really strong Pokemon, as its name and appearance would imply. It's kind of slow, though. It's really beefy defensively, though, so it's both a defensive wall and an offensive force. The evolved form of Machop, known as Machoke. The Machoke family is very powerful, but not very fast. They're decent fighting types. Personally, I like Primeape better, though, but that's just me. Bellsprout can be a decent mixed attacker. In fact, we're actually going to look for one right now. It can be somewhat of a decent mixed attacker, but unless you're willing to spend TMs on it, which are items that teach your Pokemon moves, it's not a good Pokemon. It learns terrible, terrible moves. So unless you're willing to invest, like, TMs into it, I'm going to say pass on it. Tentacool has great special defense, and it learns fantastic moves, great type, water poison, and it's actually good to have. For being such a common Pokemon, it's actually very good. You would not think something so common would be so useful. Tentacruel is a very good special wall. It is, surprisingly for something so common, it's very good. You wouldn't think something so easy to find would be so good, but it is. If you want to pick one up, by all means, if you want a special wall. Geodude, which, well, yeah. Geodude is really defensive, it's slow though, it's a rock and ground type, it has a lot of weaknesses, not really recommended much either. Next up is Ponyta. Ponyta is the fastest fire type in the game once it evolves into Rapidash. So I guess if you want a good, you know, fire type attacker, I guess it can be a good choice if you didn't choose a Cyndaquil for your starter like most people did. Slowpoke, as its name implies, is very slow, but it's also very good defensively, and it learns really good moves. It can evolve into one of two forms, Slowbro or Slowking. As Slowbro, it's more defensive. As Slowking, it's more offensive, though, so go ahead and pick your poison there if you want it. It's kind of hard to use, though, in single player due to its speed, but, well. Farfetch, which is one of the saddest Pokemon in the game. I stated my opinions on this Pokemon back in the Ilex Forest, even though you couldn't catch it there. Farfetch'd is abysmal. Like, there's a gazillion better normal flying types out there. It has no stats over 65. It's awful. Doduo in its evolved form, which we already covered. Now I would actually recommend you pick one of these up if you want a good flying type, because like I've said, Dodrio is really, really freaking fast, and it's really aggressive too. Really good flying type. I just didn't recommend it before because it was not a good trade for Dragonair. You know, Dragonair is just a better Pokemon, and it's so rare that it's not a good trade. So I wasn't saying Dodrio was bad, just that I don't recommend it then, but I do recommend it now that you can just go out and catch one. Dragonair's cute, but I don't have it. Do you have a Dragonair or want to trade for my Dodrio? Dodrio is a very, very fast Pokemon, but it doesn't have much else going for it. I personally think there's better flying types. It's really freaking fast, though. If you want a fast flying type, it's about as good as you can do in this generation. Grimer and its evolved form Muck, they're very defensive. They're actually really good in terms of special defense. Definitely good special walls if you want to have one for Poison type, though. But then again, I guess Poison not the best type to have special wall because it's weak to Psychic. Celadon also has a game corner in it, though. Next up is Shelder. When Shelder evolves, it is potentially one of the best physical walls in the game. It is just such a friend. If you want a physical wall, Shelder's your guy. But it does have that annoying extra weakness to rock that other water types don't have. Ghastly can only be found this early in the game in Crystal, so don't worry about this if you're playing Gold or Silver. It'll come up in the sidebars when you can find this in Gold or Silver, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Ghastly is a fantastic special attacker. Downside is you have to trade with somebody else to get it to its final evolutionary stage, but if you can do that, I highly recommend picking one up if you want a strong special attacker. Next up is Haunter. If you can trade to evolve this thing, having a Gengar as a star special attacker on your team would not be a bad idea at all. Unfortunately, Shadow Ball counts as physical, but it's still a good Pokemon if you want to have one. This guy asks you for a Bellsprout, and he asks you to trade it for an Onix. This is a terrible deal, because you cannot nickname this Onix Phil, because it is a traded Pokemon. But whatever. Seriously, if you chose Chikorita, it's not a bad idea to have this Pokemon, because you're going to be weak to the Gym Leader here, and Onix is a freaking beast against the Gym Leader in this area. Even if you don't plan to actually use the Onix on your team, it's still a good idea to have. Drowsy is not as good as Abra, but it's still a fairly good Psychic type. Not great, but it'll do. Krabby's not that great of a Pokemon. It's like a physical water type, which isn't a good matchup, though, so if you want to get a Voltorb, which also isn't that great, I guess it can be used for that. Voltorb is, when evolved, is the fastest Pokemon in the game as of the first 251 Pokemon. It's not very good, though. I mean, it's really just, you know, it's fast, but not much else. Electrode is the fastest Pokemon in the game as of this generation, but unfortunately the rest of its stats are not kind to it, and it does not learn very good moves for an electric type. So it's really just a Pokemon that gets in pretty much one guaranteed hit, and then after that it's going to go down. But I don't know, you might get lucky with it. That's really all it has going for it, is just being the fastest Pokemon in the game. Cubone's alright. It's... Personally, I think Phanpy's a better ground type, though, but it's still an alright ground type. Interesting bit about Cubone that's kind of sad is the fact that its original English name was going to be Orphan. Yes, I am dead serious. I always thought that was kind of grim and depressing and stuff, which I've probably said in videos before. Marowak's a pretty good ground type. If you don't have a ground type already, it's not bad to pick one up. The only thing is, like I kind of failed to mention before, is that Pokemon in Kanto are considerably lower leveled than other Pokemon. Just, you know, than your Pokemon probably are at this point in the game, so you're gonna need the experience share if you want to raise anything up. And I don't have anything to fly with, so I gotta walk back. Yay, I'm gonna cut ahead to Cerulean City, though, because I was too dumb to bring a flying Pokemon. Actually, never mind. What the heck am I thinking? There's a Pokemon Center right here I can withdraw it at. Jeez, I are totally smart. Not. The Lickitung is a very generic Pokemon. It doesn't really have anything that separates itself from other normal types. Its evolution, Licky can be a really good defensive tank, and you can get that in Heart Gold and Soul Silver only during the Johto Dex, if you level it up knowing Rollout. And then next up, something that I really like is the Coughing family. You can find Coughing here. Coughing, it's a really tactical Pokemon. It's not really fast or offensive in any way, but it's really defensive and has a lot of tactical moves like Toxic and, you know, accuracy lowering moves and stuff like that. And it's a really good physical wall if you want to raise one. It's hard to use in single player, but it's still quite good. And then you can find Wheezing here also, which is just Coughing's evolved form. It's really rare though, and you can only find it here in Crystal, so I really wouldn't recommend going for this. I just recommend catching it as a Coughing. Rhyhorn I do not recommend for the same reason that I don't recommend Rhydon. It's just too slow, it has too many weaknesses, and it's very frail in terms of special defense, which special attacks are what really matter in this game, more so than physical. And it just isn't very good without its evolution, which you can't get in the Johto Dex. In this house, this girl in Gold Silver, Heart Gold and Silver, she'll trade you a Rhydon instead of a Dodrio. Rhydon is a very slow Pokemon. It has a lot of weaknesses. It does have good physical defense, but its evolution's not obtainable in the Johto Dex, so I'd say pass on it, just because, yeah, it just isn't very good without its evolution. Tangela here, which will evolve into Tangrowth only in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which is a really good defensive tank. Like it a lot more than Licky for defenses. Learn some really good moves like Power Whip and whatnot. Really good Pokemon. Kangaskhan's a pretty good normal type. I like it, though, but personally I prefer Tauros a lot more. So I'd say pass on it if you want to get a normal type while you're here in Kanto, just because Tauros is better. Goldeen it learns some unique moves that a lot of other water types don't learn, plus it's actually able to learn the move Waterfall, which is an HM move naturally. It was actually the first Pokemon that could do this. But overall, it's not the best water type, and I much rather recommend stuff such as Croconaw, and if you didn't start with Croconaw, I definitely recommend Tentacruel by this part in the game. Goldeen's evolved form Seeking is also catchable here, same thing about that, just its evolved form. And then there's Staryu, which is a really good special attacker. If you want to evolve it into Starmie, feel free, very good Pokemon there. Anyway though, heading into Glitter Lighthouse. Other than that, the only other new Pokemon you can find here is Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime is a very good special attacker. If you want a good Psychic type, by all means, Mr. Mime is a great choice. I used it in my Fire Red Let's Play, and you guys get to see just how good it was then. Scyther, which is a very good physical sweeper, very fast, is a great evolve form too, so if you want a sweeper, by all means. Jinx, not much to say here. It's a really good special attacker, having both Ice and Psychic types. Really good for special attacking. It's definitely good if you want a Pokemon that can take on the boss next, which is going to be weak to Ice if you don't have an Ice type already. Electabuzz is alright. I guess it's a pretty good mixed electric attacker. I wouldn't really say it's great. Especially because its evolution's not obtainable as part of the Johto Dex, though, so you probably won't be able to get it, and that's why it's not listed in the bio for all you people like, you forget the 4th generation evolution disc. We're only covering ones that are in the Johto Dex, okay? Just because I want to be sure that you can obtain it, alright? Magmar's a really good mixed attacker. If you can find one of these and you want a fire type, assuming you didn't start with Cyndaquil, be my guest, of course. I like Magmar quite a bit. It's pretty good. I believe you can find these holding Magmarizers in the wild in the remake, meaning you can get the evolved form if you have a hold that and trade it, and I think you can get those as a hold item in the wild. Not 100% sure, but I think so. Pinsir! I believe this is a very underrated Pokemon, one of the best bug types there is, very beefy. By that, I just mean that it's really good defensively, and it's got really good offense. And speak of the devil, I just found one! Not found in Crystal, but you can find Tauros here. Actually, no, wait, you can find it in Crystal, never mind. You can find Tauros here on this route. Tauros is a superb normal-type Pokemon. If you want a normal-type on your team, Tauros is great. Doesn't evolve, but it doesn't need to because its stats and its moves are just so great, and it can be used for both defensive and offensive purposes. Magikarp is extremely difficult to raise, widely recognized to be the worst Pokemon in existence. But it can evolve into Gyarados, which is a really great Pokemon to have, but personally I wouldn't recommend picking up a Magikarp just because you're going to be able to get Gyarados a lot easier later in the game. And I mean a lot easier. Gyarados, though, is a very offensive Pokemon. It's unfortunately isn't very benefited in this game from that, though, because their physical water moves don't yet exist, but it's still a good Pokemon. It's very strong, very aggressive, and yeah, it gets the job done a lot of the time if you want damage done. Only real bad side is that it has a times for weakness to electric, but other than that, it's really usable on just about any team. I always wanted my own sprite recolor to call my own. Okay, but anyway, this is Lapras. Lapras is a very defensive tank, has lots of HP. It's actually a really good bulky water type, and having same type attack bonus with ice is great. So if you want to pick up a bulky water for a tank or something like that, by all means, this is a good choice. I think everybody knows about Ditto. Ditto can transform into the Pokemon. It's a really versatile Pokemon, but it's kind of a situational usage, though, so I don't think it's very usable in-game. Eevee is a highly recommended Pokemon by anyone I've ever met. It can evolve into one of 5 different Pokemon in this game, so it has a place on nearly anyone's team. It can evolve into Vaporeon, who's really defensive, Flareon, who's really offensive, Jolteon, who's very fast, Espeon, who's a great special attacker, and Umbreon, who is a frickin' tank. So yeah, I'd recommend pretty much all those except for Flareon, because its high attack is not complemented with good speed or defenses. Porygon is somewhat of a good Pokemon. When it evolves into Porygon 2, it's a very nice defensive tank. Porygon Z is not part of the Johto Dex, though, so I'm not counting it, though, as a sweeper. But if you want a defensive normal type, it's not too bad of a choice. It's very versatile in the moves that it learns, really unique. Other than that, Youngster Joey interrupting my segment. Your Rattata's looking sharper than before, at least not looking pointy. Snorlax is a very good special tank. It is one of the best special tanks in the game, and it's a pretty good physical attacking force too. And it's level 50, so if you want to have a Snorlax, you know, it's a great time to get one. There really isn't much better time. Dratini is a very tough Pokemon to raise because it evolves just so late, but if you can actually raise it, it's a really great Pokemon. So I can somewhat recommend Dratini, because you can get it so early in the game if you're playing Gold and Silver now. So it's not as bad though, but like I said, still difficult to raise up. Dragonair is extremely hard to find in this area, but it's a really freaking good Pokemon, obviously. I don't think there's such thing as a Dragon type that isn't good. Well, maybe Altaria, but that isn't until the next game. Chikorita! Chikorita is a pure grass type. It's not that good. It's weak to a lot of bosses in this game, so Chikorita is going to be the most challenging choice for you to use. So if you want a challenge, go for Chikorita. It's not a bad Pokemon, it's just weak to a lot of the common types you find in this particular game. Second choice is Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil is probably the best choice you can make, in my opinion. It's effective on a lot of bosses, learns some great moves, has stats equal to the Charmander family, so if you use Charmander in the first game, you'll be able to jump right into using Cyndaquil. And then the last choice of the 3 is Totodile, which is the water type. It's alright, it's not great, not bad. It's pretty good. The only real thing is that there's a ton of good water types in this game, so it doesn't exactly stand out much. I'd rather use Senret as an HM slave, because it learns normal HMs as well as water HMs, which is really good. If you don't know what an HM is, they're basically moves that allow you to access more areas in the game that you can't access alone. Like cutting down trees or going across water, stuff like that. Furret, which is, I guess, well, you know, it's the evolved form of Senret, I guess. I guess I could make mention of that right now. Just the evolved form of Senret, it's good for an HM slave because it learns both normal and water type HMs, so I guess you could say it's good for that. And of course it has a hold item. And, okay, at least it was just a berry, so it's nothing really that bad. Hoot Hoot, specializes in special attack and special defense. It's pretty much just a Pidgey, except it's not as sturdy and it learns moves like Hypnosis for putting foes to sleep. Ladybuzz up next. It is the suckiest suck that ever sucked. Again, just don't go for it. Only found in Silver and Crystal. Its stats are terrible, moves are awful. It's not a good Pokemon. Spinarak is next up. Only found in Gold and Crystal. It's not very good. Only found at night. I don't recommend this one. It's not a good bug type at all. Chinchou has really good attacks, considering that it can get Surf and Thunderbolt really easily, and has both same type attack bonuses on those. But its stats can make it a bit hard to use, though, so it's got good moves, but it's crippled by its stats. Not necessarily a bad Pokemon, though. Dookie dookie! I will never make that sound again. Ugh. Togepi came out of its egg. Alright, so you get a Togepi this way. This is the only way you can really get a Togepi in the game, at least as far as I know. Well, besides breeding more, but that's about it. Togepi here. It's an alright Pokemon, though. It doesn't have that great of stats. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at it right here. Only knows Growl and Charm, so it's kind of hard to raise. I only recommend it if you really, really, really just like this Pokemon. Mareep is an electric type. It's a slow electric type, but it learns great moves. It has fantastic stats other than speed once it's fully evolved. It can work for physical and special. It's just an all-around really great Pokemon. Fluffy, if you have not gotten a Mareep already and you're not playing Crystal, which, you know, you can't get into Crystal, it's a good choice for an electric type. It's not the best electric type, but it's pretty much the best this game has to offer in the early parts of the game, and it's still not bad in the later parts. Marill, this Pokemon should have its own theme park built after it. Yeah, obvious reference is obvious. Marill's really good defensively, but that's about it. It's just a bulky water type. Personally, I like other water types better, so no disrespect. Sudowoodo. Only one of these per game. Sudowoodo's, it's not something I'd really recommend. It's slow. It learns a lot of moves, though. It's got a lot of weird attacks, though, as you'll see right here in its moveset. Hoppip can only be found in Sarian Crystal. It sucks horribly, not a good grass type, only knows Splash, which is a useless move at this point in the game, so even if you want one, don't catch it now. And it's only in Crystal, so don't worry about it if you're not playing Crystal. Apom, who is a terrible Pokemon. In the remake, it can evolve into Ambipom, which is actually a really good, very versatile, tactical Pokemon. But in this game, it is worthless. Do not even go for it. Playing the remake, though, Ambipom is very strategic and learns a lot of moves like Fake Out and Toxic. Sunkern, you can only catch this when it's not the bug catching contest during the day. This thing is the weakest Pokemon. It has the worst stats of anything. Its evolved form isn't much better. Yanma. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Yanma has the potential to evolve into Yanmega in the regular Johto decks. Which Yanmega is a great Pokemon, and it also has the ability Speed Boost, which makes it so that speed gets faster every turn. It can be really good to use as a sweeper because of how high its speed can get. But unfortunately, in this game, Yanma is crap. It is just something that is only there for you to have a really difficult Pokemon to find and complete your Pokedex. Wooper! Yes, you can find Wooper here in the daytime, or, excuse me, morning or night. Wooper is actually a pretty good Pokemon. It's a pretty defensive water type. It's slow, but it's not bad. And like I said, if you can look that happy all the time and have no arms, you are amazing, and you are truly a king among kings. Next is Quagsire. Quagsire only has one weakness, which is grass, so it's great for defense, immune to electric too. A really good defensive bulky water type. Murkrow. Murkrow is terrible. You cannot get its evolution in the Johto decks. I do not recommend it at all. There's so many better flying types. It's really just mediocre, and it doesn't really have anything too spectacular about itself. And by this point, if you're using flying, you got a better flying type as it is, probably. Misdreavus, only found here at nighttime. Misdreavus is not a very good ghost type. I personally think that Gengar is a lot better. That's just me personally. This is Unknown! Unknown has 26 different forms, one for each letter of the alphabet. In the DS games, it has 2 extra forms for an exclamation mark and a question mark. It's really just a gimmick Pokemon. It is not good at any stretch of the word. It can only ever learn Hidden Power, and its stats are sucktacular. Wobbuffet is an extremely difficult Pokemon to use because it cannot directly attack in any way. All it can do is counter. That's its only method of doing damage, so Wobbuffet is very difficult to use. I do not recommend it on an in-game team. Has a lot of HP, its other stats are garbage. That's all I really have to say about it. Girafarig, who is a normal psychic type. It has good typing and all, but it's kind of a weird Pokemon, I guess. It's kind of hard to use, and it's really weird, though, but it does have a unique type and does learn some... I wouldn't say it learns necessarily unique moves, though, but... yeah, it's kind of weird. It's not exactly something I'd hugely recommend. Next up is Pineco, which eventually evolves into Forretress, which is one of the best physical defense tanks in the game. It's really good for defense. Kind of hard to use in single player. Dunsparce's 1% encounter rate, has a fantastic move pool, but its stats are god-awful. This Pokemon is not recommended at all. Gligar, only found here in Golden Crystal. Gligar's got a unique type to it, but I just don't think it's that good of a Pokemon just because its evolution's not obtainable in the Johto Dex at all. So, yeah, I just think Gligar, pass on it. It's not very good. I think the Gold players got a little cheated on the version exclusive on this route. Snubble's alright. It knows some status-inducing moves like Glare, which is kind of nice, but I just don't think its stats really make it that usable. It learns some good moves, though, like most normal types do, though, so I don't know. If you really want and you're a really big fan of the anime, I don't know, maybe. Gramble's not a very good normal type in my opinion. I just don't like it very much. I'm not a big fan of the Snubble family just because they're painfully average, aside from, I guess, having Glare, but I can't really think of too much else Gramble would be good for. Diverse moves, don't really like it much. Qwilfish is not a very good Pokemon. It has terrible stats. It's not a good Pokemon. By no means as good as water poison type as Tentacle is, and great, I got noticed. But it's a rare Pokemon, and this is an easy way to find it if you give them your phone number, and if you want to complete your Pokedex, it's a good way to find it. Shuckle, it has the strongest defense and special defense of anything in the game, but in return, its attack and speed are abysmal. It's really good defensively, though, but it's extremely difficult to use in battle, especially in single player. But yeah, Heracross. Heracross is one of the best Pokemon in the game. It's a bug fighting type, meaning it has a lot of weaknesses, but in return, oh god, is it good. Okay, its physical attack stat is ridiculously high. Its move Mega Horn is pretty much the bane of the existence of any Psychic or Dark type. It just, all around, is an absolute beast when it comes to physical attacking, and its special defense is not that bad either. Sneasel is a really good physical attacker when it evolves, but unfortunately its evolution's not part of the Johto Dex in the remake, so I'm gonna say pass on this one if you want a nice type attacker. Teddiursa it's not too bad actually. I wouldn't really recommend it though, like for this early in the game though. It's really not that big of a benefit to have Teddiursa this early in the game compared to most other normal types. Ursaring, only found in Gold. Ursaring is actually a pretty good Pokemon. It's a really strong normal type. I guess if you want to get a normal type, you can, though. I don't know why you'd want one by this point, considering how common they are. Slugma is a very slow, very defensive fire type. That does not fit a fire type very well. Fire types generally need to be fast and need to do a lot of special damage, because of the fact they have a lot of weaknesses. So having a defensive fire type that is very slow, it's not a good matchup, not a good combination. I say skip on Slugma. There's many better fire types out there that are much more better suited for what fire types generally do with their move pools. Swinub, in the remake, you can get its final evolved form, Mamoswine, prior to the end of the Johto Dex. Mamoswine, if you were playing the remake, Mamoswine is a great Pokemon. It's physically defensive, it does a lot of damage, it learns really good moves. It's the only Pokemon in the game that is not affected by Sandstorm or Hail, because it's Ice and Ground. Corsola, which is a very, very badly typed Pokemon, being Water and Rock. Corsola, not very good at all. I have no idea why I was walking around there. Remoraid, it's not that great of a Water-type Pokemon. It's just a really rare fish Pokemon, I guess you could say. It's kind of like the Feebas of this generation. Only found in this route, only found in Gold, Silver, not in Crystal. Delibird is probably one of the worst Pokemon ever. By the way, we just found HM07, which is Waterfall, which we're going to need for later, so you are going to want to get that while you're here, or else you're going to be lost later. Mantine, only found in Gold and Crystal. Mantine, I think, is a very underrated Pokemon. It's a very good special wall. If you just look at its special defense and its HP, it makes a very good defender. Plus, its type isn't too bad either, I have to admit. Skarmory, you can only find it here in Gold and in Silver and Crystal. Skarmory is arguably one of the best defensive tanks in the game for the fact that it's immune to ground, which is a great type, and it's only weak to fire and electric. Its physical defense is through the roof. It's basically a physical version of Mantine. Houndour is actually a very good special attacker. If you are looking for a fire type and don't have one already by the Kanto half of the game, when Houndour evolves into Houndoom at a fairly low level, it's a very good special attacker, and it's got some really decent type coverage. I recommend Phanpy quite a bit. It's slow, but it's got a ton of defense, ton of attack power, learns great moves, and it has a lot of HP. I like it a lot. I use a Donphan. You don't have to know that I love it. It's a good Pokemon with really good stats. It just takes a while to get good moves. That's its only main problem. Stantler is a normal type Pokemon. It's pretty decent. It learns some cool attacks like Hypnosis for putting foes to sleep. So, I guess if you want to have an unusual Pokemon like that, you can have it on your team, though. The only downside is, it kind of falls behind in terms of stats in the later parts of the game. So, maybe just catching one for now, just to have it to put stuff to sleep in boss fights would be a good idea, and then just dumping it later. Tyrogue is not a bad fighting type, actually. It can evolve into 3 different Pokemon. If it has higher defense, at level 20, it'll evolve into a Hitmonchan. Higher attack, it'll evolve into Hitmonlee, but if its attack and defense are equal, you get the rare Hitmontop. Really, I guess... Personally, Hitmonlee is my favorite of them, but if you're playing the remake, I guess Hitmonchan would be the best choice, because in the remake, the different punches that Hitmonchan has are counted as physical, plus it has that ability that raises the power of punching moves. So, up to you. I personally am not a big Hitmontop person. Miltank, as its name implies, is a tank. This thing is actually really good. It's very good defensively and offensively. Plus with Milk Drink, free recovers. Milk Drink also, little known thing, is that it has a secondary effect in battle. And, I mean, not in battle, is the fact that it has the same thing as Soft Boiled, where you can heal your other Pokemon by using it on your other Pokemon, but Miltank loses HP in the process. Random encounter jump cut. You actually could get this and sell it on from the game corner, though, but I forgot to mention it, is Larvitar. Larvitar is kind of this generation's counterpart to Dragonite. Larvitar is a very, very good Pokemon once it's fully evolved. Has a lot of power to it, it's very resilient. Rock and Dark type when it's fully evolved, very good Pokemon.